On this week's Linux Adventures, we're going to go over kind of a lot of projects, some fun stuff I've been working on. And what are your questions for Greg Kroah-Hartman? Because I've got an interview with him coming up, going to check in and see how he's doing with his machine. And I might finally have time to put together my PDP-1 with the PDP-11. I've got the PDP-1 from the same guy, but this is in a wall-hanging format. And boy, it's going to take me a long time to put together. I've had it for a while. He sent it to me. And that's probably about the last of it that you're going to see on this video. Oh, also, Xeon 6 testing. Xeon 6 testing has not gone exactly according to plan because when Xeon 6 first launched, I was able to get some affordable, like $1,000-ish Xeon 6 CPUs on eBay. And now they're like $2,000, $2.5 grand, $3,000. And that was only like a month and a half ago, so I don't know what happened. But got some reviews coming up. This is the Gigabyte MW94 RP0. This is a non-overclocking Xeon 6 workstation motherboard, but so far in testing, it's been pretty solid. So here we have our quad Intel B70, 128 gigs of VRAM in this machine, and it is badass when we're talking about, Intel's fully sanctioned driver stack. But I've been trying to get this to work with OpenSickle and get it to work really well. You see right next to the quad B70, I've got a quad B60 running at the same time. And that's 96 gigs of memory because 4 times 24 gigs. And it's also kind of badass because these are so affordable for 32 gigs of VRAM. So if you know anything about OpenSickle or you're working on projects or you can point me toward like off-roadmap stuff, there's been a lot of excitement around the off-roadmap GPUs in general. And I really would love to see something running on these is like, 200 tokens per second or 700 tokens per second or something absolutely absurd. Right now, it seems like Quinn 27B, the dense model, or one of the distills of Quinn, like Quopus, or there's another one that they turned me on to on the other video, might be a fun adventure. So little Linux adventure happening here as well. And then this, down in the scary basement, also 128 gigs of memory, but this is the R9700 system. This one is also running a bunch of stuff to try to, unlock some software magic. And a lot of magic is happening. AMD just launched their AI Halo. Check out that video. I won't rehash that or get into that too much here, but at the day that they launched that, they also unlocked some examples, playbooks, recipes that go with getting the R9700s working. Now, there's not a lot of people out there that have 4 R9700s in a system. But as far as open source development goes, and this is maybe seeding questions for the upcoming interview with Greg Kroah-Hartman, it's like, wait, what are you doing with your 32 gigs of VRAM? What's going on with that? Because I know that there's been a lot of fun, exciting developments on Linux, the Linux kernel lately, because there have been so many CVE reports that have been taken seriously, which is good. And so you've got Linus Torvalds with his Intel, he was a B60, B70, so his fancy pants GPU. And then you got Greg Kroah-Hartman with his R9700. Eric Raymond was recently here. Got him fixed up with the R9700. The AMD GPU was his preference, and he is running local AI to do experiments, clean up things, although he's still, there's a big difference between local AI and like the frontier cloud model. Like it is like the difference between an Apple II and a mainframe of the era. That's kind of what's going on there. But the Linux plumbing, like the driver plumbing to just use the GPU, so many long-standing bugs with the GPUs have been fixed. High refresh bugs, windowing and compositing bugs, window manager bugs, bugs in stuff that have been there like 10 or 15 years that are not necessarily security issues, but are just quality of life issues, improved dramatically over the last 2 or 3 months. And, more people having access to the hardware. Mine are mismatched because I've given a lot of them away. I've given a lot of R9700s away. 2 of our community members, one R9700s. Hopefully they're getting along with that. I think one of them was a student or a researcher. They had some papers and some interesting stuff going on with that. So that's been a lot of fun. But what else is in the Linux news this week? And as always, the first place I'll start is Linux Weekly. But what you didn't know is I actually already secretly started on Linux Weekly. The very last topic there was like, hey, you know what's going on with Rockham and the Rock? But anyway, enough about that. Let's move on to other topics. Last week we talked a little bit about the BC250. Sergeant Awesome Sauce in his thread is showing off his BC250 setup. Those were on sale at one point for $77. It's like, seriously, $250 is sort of the ceiling for those, really, seriously. Also, System 76, their Thelio system based around the 9950X 3D2. I really have to send that back. This is your last chance to get in any kind of tests or questions or anything with that setup that you want me to see. So, or if you want me to ask or test or whatever. Overall, the long-term testing has gone well. Again, surprised at how much the Linux distros have improved. Patches and updates, that sort of thing. Not just the security bug fixes. The next biggest piece of news, kind of Linux adjacent, mostly Linux adjacent, is the FTC and John Deere have struck a deal for right to repair. It's great, it's fantastic, much needed victory lap. However, it does not cover the software. This is a huge problem. You have the John Deere tractor, you have all the stuff, you know the nuts and bolts, you got the repair manual, everything is great. The problem is that you still don't have good insight and visibility into the software. You still, under this proposal, do not have any guarantees from John Deere that they're not going to screw you with the software. There is a lot of startup checks that these tractors do for boot up. I mean, everything from like sensor check to emissions check to, there's a whole host of checks. And even if like the emission sensor fails and you say, hey, it's cool, override that, I'm going to have to go harvest my crops, the software will not let you do that. And this is a problem. And I think that that is not a problem that can get fixed legislatively directly with John Deere's involvement. And I'm sort of imagining a renewed open source movement. This is one of the things that I discussed with Eric Raymond, where there is a bit of a keyhole in the DMCA because it assumed that nobody would, or most people would have, amazing abilities to do content protection circumvention without tooling. An LLM is an amazing tool producing apparatus. And so there might be a little bit of a keyhole. This might be a thing for Lawrence Lessig or somebody like that to weigh in on, where you could use an LLM to build your own tools to get around whatever protections there are in order to do the thing that you need to do. And that is probably a loophole that will get closed very quickly legislatively if it does not already exist. And or by the time it gets to the Supreme Court, because somebody will do something, by the time it gets to the Supreme Court, it will probably already be too late. But that is maybe something that we can enshrine in law. What I mean by that is that you could use an LLM to talk to your John Deere tractor and say, hey, let's patch this part of the code out because I need to go harvest my crops and this emission sensor is actually malfunctioning, not an actual emissions problem with my tractor. Our right to reverse engineer must not be curtailed, like shall not infringe levels of protection for that kind of thing. That might be the thin end of the wedge that we interested parties could get behind and get, leverage in and get some traction, some legal traction to be able to protect that. It's like, I'm not even asking you for documentation. I'm just saying that when I go to do this, when I go to do this level of repair, and when I publish what I have discovered from doing this, then we should do that. And before any of you, there will be people that do pearl clutching, and it's like, oh, you can't do that. We would not have had the computer revolution had Compaq not done that with IBM. Compaq did clean room, very careful. IBM was sort of upset about this reverse engineering of the IBM PC BIOS because they had the hardware, but they didn't have the software. These things have played out in history before. But now with the tooling and things being more advanced, these advanced tools can reach into the near past and the far past to bring forward a lot of engineering and really interesting things and support and debugging and black box code that we probably don't even have the source code for anymore to reproduce those binaries. You can take code that exists on these systems or code that exists only in binary form on old computers and build a harness to reproduce source code that will produce the binary. That was an insane, Sisyphean task just a few years ago, but now is entirely possible. And I think that that is going to be a big part of right to repair, or enshrining that right in right to repair. Making sure that shall not be infringed is part of that, because I think right now it's probably okay. And what's wild about that is if you explain that to a normal human being in the terms that it really is, a normal human being would say, wait a minute, that's not reasonable at all. That's not in my best interest. Why would I do that? Yeah, it relies on manipulation and procedural adulteration in order to convince people to vote against their own interests. Oh, speaking of which, EU chat control. Yeah, good job voting against even if you're 100% all in for chat control, which how could you be when you look into it? Procedurally, you have to look at what they did in order to get chat control passed. It is underhanded. And again, a reasonable person would look at the sequence of events that transpired as they are, with no color, with no editorial as to what happened. It's like voted down a second time. A bunch of MPs went home for vacation. It was the last day of session. Perhaps they should not have left early. And it was resubmitted as an emergency motion. And so in an emergency motion, you don't have to vote it. If you, in an emergency motion, in an emergency motion, you explicitly have to vote to stop it. Not, the absence of a vote is not treated as a no. So there's not enough votes to pass. A second vote, not enough votes to pass. The third vote, because it was an emergency thing, not enough votes to pass is not really a thing there anymore. You would have to have 2/3 of people voting it down to stop it from passing. Well, there wasn't enough people there to do that. And a number of people were voting through chat control because I'm sure that they don't really fully understand. If they're earnestly voting, I don't think they understand the technical fallout that they are creating from what they're doing. And if they do understand, then they definitely do not have humanity's best interests in mind, because it will be corrupted as everything else has been corrupted. This is one of the most important stones in the great firewall of the EU, meaning that in order for you to have a conversation with another person, the state is going to have to be in the room. And if you explain it that way to a person, suddenly they're probably thinking, wait a minute, that doesn't sound amazing. Especially, Orwell in the UK, it's coming. Also noticed a little bit of uptick in self-hosting stories and self-hosting threads on the forum and self-hosting stuff on the internet in general. How2Geek has an interesting blurb about why developers are ditching GitHub for Codeberg and self-hosting alternatives. I myself have seen a lot of uptick in interest in self-hosted GitHub alternatives, partly because GitHub gonna GitHub, but partly because of sovereign and control. The malware surface for GitHub has been a little bit weird. Some weird behavior out of GitHub in general lately. I don't really want to get into that too much. I've done enough soapboxing here. There is a Gitea, I don't know how you say that, is a 0-day that is actively being exploited in the wild now. So your window for updating has probably already passed. Sorry, you're going to need to secure that. But I think a lot of those self-hosting technologies are about to come together, and I think we're about to have major breakthroughs in self-hosting capabilities, not because self-hosting is amazing or because having your stuff on your crappy ISP connection at home is good, but because there are enough reverse VPN type services. Reverse VPN is probably not the best way to describe that, but the specific things that I'm thinking of are Cloudflare tunnels and Tailscale, what they're doing. And there was also a couple others that I looked into after the last time I mentioned this. I started some projects. There are actually some really good internet ingress gateways that have services that are kind of aligned with what I'm thinking in terms of letting stuff into your own home network. So I think from a technological standpoint, being able to self-host your own stuff on a crappy internet connection, even if you have carrier-grade NAT, or multiple crappy internet connections where it's a relatively low traffic situation and you also don't give away a lot of your public infrastructure from like a denial of service or malware attack standpoint. And so we may see the pendulum swing the other way from centralization of even things like email services. I'm sure with the EU, there are a lot of people out there working on true full open source groupware applications that are not bolted together old unmaintainable code. Like, I look at OpenOffice and LibreOffice and like the code base is old and it's like, doesn't seem super maintainable to me. I want to build like what Jeff Atwood, coding horror Jeff Atwood, did to reimagine what forums are with the discourse. It's like, I'm just going to sit down. All forum software is broken. Let's reimagine this. Somebody like that is or should be doing that with email hosting and document hosting and that sort of thing. Maybe Nextcloud will evolve into that, but I'm worried that Nextcloud's momentum has sort of fallen off a little bit, and they really need to rethink. If I look at Nextcloud and I look at what I've got sort of sketched out in my head, major engineering challenge, major engineering changes, and it is aimed at the 25-person company, or the tech head family, where it's like, okay, we've got 3, 4, 5 accounts, husband and wife and maybe their parents, and then the kids, as like a family unit, and they're managing calendars and to-dos and grocery lists just as easily as 25-person company is managing that kind of stuff. So I think with the EU sovereign stuff, we will see more of that. I know Synology is working on that. So I went to visit Synology for Computex to find out what was going on with the hard drives. And so I have a video coming up on that. It's like, hey, what's going on? And Synology has leaned into the enterprise, because what were traditionally incumbent enterprises have expanded up into the bubble and has left a void for like the 25-person companies. And Synology is really leaning into that. And Synology is about to become a $1 billion company. So I have a video about that coming out. Check that out. It's really interesting. But that's part of the reason why they're leaning away from the DIY segment, in terms of, because it's a large part of the support part of it, and like the support stuff and supporting, they really just don't want to support third-party hard drives and that sort of stuff across all of their products. They're still going to do it at the low end, but not the low end, but like the consumer, entry-level prosumer segment, but enterprise doesn't care. And it's because of the growth in the EU and the growth in a lot of those other markets. And that is kind of a microcosm of what I'm talking about. The EU and sovereign data is going to create a huge amount of economic opportunity, assuming that the money's there for open source and platforms. And it's like, I need a turnkey EU solution to be able to do ABC, XYZ. Proxmox is already benefiting from this EU sovereign data thing. And there are incredible things happening for things that live on top of Proxmox to extend Proxmox functionality, replace some VMware functionality, replace things like VMware Horizon. You can kind of get there now with some stuff that sits on top of Proxmox. That's another thing that I was working on this week, but I haven't made a lot of progress with that. We'll talk about that later. That'll probably be a next week project. And so like a Horizon-like thing for virtual desktops and ephemeral virtual desktop creation and deletion on top of Proxmox, not from Proxmox, but this suite of products can be a really amazing thing. So the EU is going to probably seed those kinds of things earnestly, which I'm really excited about. And it all starts in basements like this. I'm Whittle. This is enough rambling this week for Linux Weekly. Thank you for watching and tuning in and subscribing and doing whatever it is that you do to help support us, engage in the forum, working on more engagement, more documentation, more tools to let people become sovereign and also understand things at least the way that I see them. And I'm happy. If I'm wrong, I'm happy to learn more, change my position, and it's like, oh, now that I know more, I don't see it that way. But yeah, I think the future belongs to people. And I think the future belongs to people with these really advanced tools. And you should be insanely suspicious of anybody that seeks to take anything away from you in terms of tooling or functionality. They are up to no good. I'm Whittle, this level 1, Linux. I'm signing out. You can find me in the forums.